All right. Welcome to the show. This is the Frankly Fantasy Football Podcast. We are your hosts, Frankie and Johnny. Welcome to the Super Bowl week, my man. How are you representing Frankly Fantasy? Where you at? I'm excited. Tell me.
John, I have, just a belly full of Christmas spirit coming off of a beautiful holiday. And, while watching on Christmas Eve, I watched a guy almost take shape into a form of an angel, is what happened, John, in Amari Cooper. And he took flight and took me to 2 Super Bowls, baby. Representing Amari Cooper, Browns guy, took me to the promised land. Hey, man, I'm representing Frankly Fantasy in 2 Super Bowls this year, baby.
Good for you, man. Good for you. My watch has ended, but you're going to bring home some. You know what I want to see next year, Frankie? Episode 1 of season 4, I want to see 2 trophies behind you, just standing sentinel guarding you every day.
Gotta keep rubbing it, baby. Gotta keep rubbing it. Touch it, rub it, feel it, believe it.
Yeah, remind me to get some Clorox wipes and wipe those down before the next draft, man. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is it, baby. This is Super Bowl week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. Guys, I have to start this episode by just shouting out the listeners, the audience. You guys have been amazing. Far surpassing our expectations of this year. Guys, we're a couple of subscribers away from a major milestone as a podcast on YouTube. 1,000 subscribers. We're almost there. Please, guys, last episodes here of the season, share it, subscribe it. Please tell a few friends about it. Get us to that milestone. Another huge milestone for us. We're going to be creeping up on episode 100 here in the next few episodes. So great time, man. Finishing season 3 real strong. Really excited about everything going on here, man. All right, first of all, today, guys, it's a Super Bowl. We're going to spend almost the entire time talking about guys, of what's going on with them, starts and sits. Are we starting these guys? Is this guy going to help you win your Super Bowl? Frankie's got some magic for us, no doubt about that. We've got some streams as well, and we're going to get into a little bit of the Thursday Night Football preview, and we're going to touch on the Saturday game. There's a Saturday game this week as well. But first, as always, we're going to get in some news, baby.
The season that your listeners don't expect.
News and notes.
Also, happy holidays to everyone. And I want to shout out really quickly, Casey Laurie, Frankie, your wife, got us another great Frankly Fantasy Football swag cup. I love it, man. I love it. As soon as I saw a present from Case Babe, I went, oh, God, this is going to be some Frankly gear. I'm excited. Yes.
You got to get pumped about it. And for those listening and watching, not only is my wife a smoke show, shout out, babe, but also an avid listener and a badass fantasy football player. So, yeah, man, kind of hit the gold mine. Cheers, Case Babe.
You're definitely punching above your weight class, Frankie.
Definitely.
Yeah, you wake up every morning and say, thank God I have this woman. All right, let's get into some news. Let's see where everybody is here for this week. TJ Hockenson, tight end for the Minnesota Vikings, torn ACL and MCL. He's going to be out. Guys, we're going to get into the last couple of episodes we're going to do here for the year. We're going to start just kind of doing a year in review, looking at a recap of where everybody ended up. But one thing we're also going to do is we're going to kind of be speculating about some of the top picks for next year and what we're going to be looking at. And there's a lot of these guys that had some injuries, Nick Chubb, TJ Hockenson, just to name a few, these ACL injuries. And are they going to be back early in the season, or when are they potentially going to be back? It's going to affect your draft strategy for next year. So stay tuned for that coming up. Staying with the Vikings here, Jordan Addison is week to week with an ankle. When you're week to week, very unlikely you're playing that first week. It would say day to day otherwise. So the Vikings could be without TJ Hockenson and Jordan Addison. Frankie, is that all systems go for JJ this week? Could JJ win you your Super Bowl?
John, yes. All systems go for JJ, and in deeper leagues, guys, if you had the injury bug, if you had some of these people that unfortunately are just underperforming or are out, John, KJ Osborne, I mean, he stepped in and looked really well with Nick Mullins. Again, I might not be the guy that ends up putting him in, but if you, depending on your roster construction, you might need to. And it's not a by any means, terrible start, especially against that of Green Bay Packers, John.
The Packers have the 6th worst pass defense in the league right now. Yeah, I mean, it's something that I would consider, and it's just sheer volume. If you're talking about Addison being out for sure, Hockenson is going to be out. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be targets that are going to go to KJ Osborne. It's just math. They have to. Not a bad play if you are hurting. I agree with you, Frank. Okay, let's keep moving on here. Trevor Lawrence, man, this guy just can't get a break. It's a different injury every week for him. Has a shoulder sprain. Questionable to play. CJ Beathard's ready to go if he needs to. Frank, talk a little bit about the Jaguars. I mean, without this is serious. I mean, obviously, it's a completely different team without Trevor Lawrence. How are you feeling about these assets, specifically Calvin Ridley, when it comes to not having Trevor Lawrence in potentially?
Yeah, John, I got to be honest. I still like Calvin Ridley. I do. I think that he might even get targeted more than that of Trevor Lawrence at the helm, because Trevor Lawrence has been passing the ball kind of to everybody, which has been great. But the issue is now he hasn't really been honing in on Calvin Ridley as much. So, John, for me, I'm actually not. Let me put it like this, guys. I'm not super low on Calvin Ridley, nor am I super high on Calvin Ridley. I'm staying even keel with Calvin Ridley. I don't see a lot of things changing. Where I do see an uptick, John, is Travis Etienne. Had an abysmal game, and we'll hit on that as well. But I think that now having another week in practice and getting, a much better in terms of matchup, I actually like Travis Etienne. So I think that we could see a nice little uptick here. But this is a must-win game. Guys, don't get this twisted, right? This is Jags fighting their ass off to win their division. And with Indy losing and Houston losing, it's still wide open, and Jags are the front runner. So yeah, man, they're going to need to rely on their superstars, that being Etienne, Evan Ingram, and that of Calvin Ridley to get it done.
All 3 of those teams were 7-6. All 3 of those teams lost. That division is wide open.
Or 8-6, so I think. Yeah.
Or 8-6. Yeah. So it's a huge game for all those teams. They're playing at home against Carolina. Yeah. It is going to be the Travis Etienne show. No doubt about that. Definitely. Especially with CJ Beathard starting. Okay. Jalen Waddle, wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins, high ankle sprain. He's going to miss, guys. He's going to be out. Make other plans there. Isaiah Pacheco, this was so unfortunate. The guy came back after missing a week, left the game with a concussion. Did you see the concussion, by the way, with Isaiah Pacheco?
Yeah, it was.
Helmet falls off, takes a knee. It was friendly fire. Takes a knee to the head and is just sitting there holding his head like that. That was rough. He's in the concussion protocol right now, so keep an eye on this. After I think this is his 2nd concussion in like the past couple of weeks here, keep an eye on this. Right now, it is CEH alone in the backfield. Jerick McKinnon was put on IR. If Pacheco doesn't play, are we looking at CEH as being a smash play or just kind of a eh?
John, in deep leagues, yeah. If you're in a double flex, 12 to 16 man league, absolutely. I mean, because you have no Pacheco, you'll have no McKinnon. They do have, I believe it's Prince, if I remember correctly, his last name, running back there. But other than that, CEH has proven he can handle it, John, from the limited amount of time. Again, he didn't have a really good showing last week. Again, it was that was a really strange game for the Chiefs. I mean, John, you watched it just like I did. Weird. I mean, Raiders beat the fuck out of them in every way, shape, or form. So I think that this week especially, I think that this could be a smash play for CEH.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, they're playing Cincinnati. They're playing at home. They were embarrassed last week. That was very shocking. I think they're going to come out fired up and pissed off. And this team, when Pacheco's not in the game, it changes this team completely. They need to run the ball. This is not the Chiefs of a couple of years ago. They must establish the run. So, yeah, CEH could be a smash play. You can run on these Cincinnati Bengals as well. Okay, moving on here. Dontavian Wicks, rookie wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, left the game with a chest injury, so he's questionable. Monitor his status. Michael Pittman Jr., wide receiver for the Colts, placed back into the concussion protocol. He made it out and then was placed back in. That's weird. Keep an eye on him. He's questionable for this week. That would be huge if he ends up missing that. Like I said, Trevor Siemian is looking to start for the Jets this week against the Browns. No little fucking Mormon kid. He's probably a little scared of the Browns this week. Who knows? But the Browns will be facing Trevor Siemian. Enjoy the Browns defense that week for sure. Yeah. Brock Purdy. Rough game last week. We'll talk about him in a second here. He left the game with a stinger. Apparently it was just a stinger in his shoulder. Should be good to go for against Washington. Pay attention to that. If he plays, smash play for Brock Purdy, no question. Cortland Sutton in concussion protocol. Cole Kmet left the game, tight end for the Chicago Bears, left the game with a knee injury and is questionable. So keep an eye on him. All right, Frank, let's get into, I'm playing the last Ice and Fire here. Let's play a little bit of Game of Thrones, right? Yeah. That's right, man. That's right. All right, so let's get into Ice and Fire here, man. We got some guys on ice. I want to talk specifically about guys that you may be starting in your Super Bowl. There were a lot of guys that didn't do shit, but chances are you don't have to make the choice for these guys in your Super Bowl. Brock Purdy, we did just talk about him. 4.4 points. He did get hurt, but before that, it was brutal. He threw 4 picks. Again, this week, he's got Washington. I assume we just kind of throw away what happened this past week, fire up Brock Purdy with full confidence. Is that right?
No question. No question. And there's really no further analysis on that, John. You're 100% accurate. It was Baltimore had his number. Brock Purdy picked a bad game to play his worst. And now moving forward, you're playing against the, arguably one of the top 2 worst teams in the NFL from a defensive perspective. So smash play.
All right, let's look at James Cook here, man, because James Cook has been on absolute fire. Let's get into a few running backs. James Cook, running back for the Buffalo Bills, 3 points last week. What happened there, Frank, and what are you looking at this week? What's the matchup looking like?
John, this was really strange, man. I mean, first and foremost, against that of the Chargers, this was everything. I mean, everybody was like, yeah, James Cook is the guy. There's no question about it. What was interesting is we saw the emergence of Fournette, and we actually saw him take away from that of James Cook. Now, James Cook still, looking back, he still ran the ball 20 times for 70 yards. The issue is, John, is that he ended up fumbling. He actually ended up fumbling, I believe, twice, if I remember correctly, and he lost one of those. So in leagues like ours, to where you might lose 2 points for a fumble, and then if it's a fumble lost, it's an additional point, and no touchdowns and no receptions, right? Then, James Cook in a half PPR goes from 7 points down to 3. And so for me, man, I really think that the Bills need to continue to get him involved. I truly think that this is right. It wasn't like he looked like shit, right? You still ran the ball 20 times, 70 yards, etc. And you're going into the New England team to where it's must win. As a Buffalo Bill team, it is a must-win game against a divisional opponent who, by the way, had your number last time you played them. The Patriots beat the Bills last time. So for me, man, the new OC, I think that they are going to look to get Cook into this game plan very heavily early on. But there's still a part of me that's like, man, when Fournette touched that ball, John, he looked freaking good, man. I mean, he looked real good. So I'm hoping what I'm banking on for this game is the aggressive nature for New England from the defensive perspective, to where now they're going to need to get James Cook involved much, much heavier in that receiving game this week, especially for your Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I could see that happening. I mean, the last time they played New England at New England, James Cook had 17 points. He was the running back 8 on the week. He had 13 rushes for 56 yards, but he had 3 catches for 46 yards and a score. Right. That's what we need to see out of James Cook. Yeah. I do think that they're going to get that. That New England's strength is against the running back, but it's against the running back in rushing. You can throw on the running back or to the running back on New England's defense. That's what we're banking on. So are we saying yay for James Conner or for James Cook?
For James Cook? Yeah. I'm firing him up, guys. I'm firing him up. Yeah. I'm being a little bit more timid, right, than I have been in the past, but I definitely see a double-digit point week for sure.
Excellent. Sounds good. All right, Devon Achane. It's very difficult, man. It's hard. You've got the promise of a potential just boner week out of him every week, but you've also got opportunities like this where 3 points out of Devon Achane. This week, this is going to be tough, man. We need your help on this one. We got a big AFC matchup with the Baltimore Ravens and the Miami Dolphins. We got Achane and Mostert. What are we doing with these guys against this excellent Baltimore Ravens defense?
John, here's what I would do. If I'm staring at both of these teams or both of these players, I'm going to start Mostert this week. I feel like that there's enough there, especially what CMC did. And we saw kind of the ability that he had. Again, CMC is a unicorn. Let me be very crystal clear on that. Nobody is as good as CMC this year from the running back position. But I do like Mostert. He does find a way to find the end zone. He's like tied with CMC, I believe, or one now touchdown behind CMC for the most touchdowns in the NFL. So I really like him. I am sitting Devon Achane. Okay. I'm sitting Devon Achane this week, John, and it's because of an amalgamation of things, right? It is the last 3 weeks, he's had 9.6 points against Tennessee, 7.7 points against that of the Jets, and this past week against Dallas, right? He had 3.6 points. And by the way, all of those were great game scripts. So what this is telling me is if you're in the Super Bowl or in that consolation game, right? Third place, you're still getting that $100, $50, $150, whatever it is. I'm not willing to put that on Devon Achane this week. Baltimore is too good. Baltimore is firing on all cylinders, and they have something to prove still, right? So does Miami. Baltimore needs to lock this up in its entirety this week against Miami. And so with that being said, I know there's really two people they cannot let go crazy. Tyreek and that of Devon Achane. If those two go crazy, Baltimore's in deep shit, right? Mostert, more than likely, John, will end up getting his to a certain degree, right? In my personal opinion, I really see that. I think Mostert is of that level. But for me, man, and I think obviously Tyreek to a certain degree as well. But man, I'm not willing to put my eggs in Devon Achane's basket over the last 3 weeks because of the last 3 weeks and because of the defense that they're playing at Baltimore.
All right, well, let me ask you this. We're recording this on Wednesday morning. So, there's going to be some things happening here in the meantime and before this game happens. Mostert, a little banged up. He injured his knee a tad in the game. He ended up coming back into the game, but he could have a setback. He could have some swelling. Something could happen here. If Mostert doesn't go,
you fire him up.
Limited.
You fire
up Achane if he's got the backfield to himself. Okay.
You fire up Achane, you put him in the flex, you put him in an RB2 spot. Maybe you had Pacheco, maybe you had Josh Jacobs, right? Maybe some of your other guys have some really difficult matchups, right? Then at that point in time, definitely you can fire him up, and it's strictly just a volume play at that point.
Okay. All right. We talked about James Cook. We want to fire him up. Achane, we're going to sit him unless he's alone in the backfield. Travis Etienne, 4.8 points this past week. Tough week for Travis. We talked about this, though. It's smash play this week, so we definitely are saying start Travis Etienne.
Definitely.
All right, Kenneth Walker. Talk to me a little bit about Kenneth Walker, man. He's one of those guys that I think people are going, man, do I start him? Seattle seems to be so up and down right now. 6 points last week for Kenneth Walker. What are you looking at for this week for him?
I like Kenneth Walker this week, man. I really do. What the Seattle Seahawks have done, John, has been nothing short of incredible with the schedule that they've had. I mean, we look at what Kenneth Walker, he's had, John, because he was hurt, right? I mean, he was banged up for a few weeks in week 12 and week 13, comes back at San Francisco, playing them in a tough defense, still had 7.4 points, plays Philly, a very good rush defense, right? 18.7 points. In Tennessee, again, Tennessee's not getting enough love for their defensive front there against the rush. And he had 6 points. So yeah, it was a down, again, this is half PPR, but it was a down week this past week against Tennessee. All to be said, Pittsburgh's D against the rush is nowhere close to those other three teams I mentioned. So for me, man, I do like Kenneth Walker Jr. Kenneth Walker III, this week against that of Pittsburgh. And I think that he could end up being potentially a Super Bowl winning running back. That's how much I believe in him. And John, when we start looking at his game log and the amount of volume that he's getting, even with Zach Charbonnet, I mean, the week he came back against San Francisco, right? He only had 8 rushes, 21 yards. But what was interesting is he had 5 targets for 4 receptions for 33 yards. And we haven't really seen that from Kenneth Walker at all this year. And then you look at, okay, well, after that game, what did it look like for Philly and Tennessee? Philly, 19 rushes, 86 yards and a touchdown, had 3 targets for 3 receptions. And then this past week against Tennessee, again, it was somewhat of a down week. He still ran the ball 16 times for 54 yards and still had 2 targets. So, John, this guy, to me, even though the points say a little bit otherwise, he truly, in my opinion, has a high floor. So if you're looking for a high floor type of play in your Super Bowl, I think that Kenneth Walker III can absolutely be that player for you.
Potential league winner. You heard it here first. Kenneth Walker III. Start him up. All right, let's look at some receivers here, man. We'll keep a few of these guys for some start-sit questions here in a little bit. Devontae Adams. Less than a point out of Devontae Adams. That's pretty rough there. Moving forward, you're starting Devontae Adams in your Super Bowl, correct?
You're definitely starting Devontae Adams in your Super Bowl. Guys, this was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life in football. What I'm going to say is going to blow your mind. Aiden O'Connell did not have 1 completion after the first quarter. Think about what I'm saying. The starting quarterback for the Raiders did not have 1 completion after the first quarter, and they won the ball game. They won against Kansas City. That's absurd. So what this tells me, man, is complete anomaly. Raiders found a way to win. And this was more of a Antonio Pierce type of win, meaning this game was for them. They didn't give a shit who was getting the ball. They knew that it was going to have to be the defense to win the game, and that's what happened. Raiders had the top performing defense of fantasy football and was brilliant. Right? Back-to-back touchdowns, defensive touchdowns. So what I'm getting at, guys, bringing it full circle, the Raiders are not playing Kansas City, right? They're playing Indy in a must-win game for both teams who are fighting their nuts off. And right now, John, Indy's looking banged up. They just got throttled by Atlanta. And by the way, Bijan Robinson looked good against them. And even Kyle Pitts looked good against them. And they tried to get the ball to Drake London, and it just didn't work out. Devontae Adams is better than all of those people I just mentioned. Okay? And I think that moving forward for this week, I'm telling you, I am firing up Devontae Adams, and I expect a bounce back week for this specific game. So yes, fire him up. Complete anomaly, super strange game.
All right, let's get to a couple of other guys here. D-Hop, this is your playoff or your Super Bowl now, man. DeAndre Hopkins, Tennessee Titans, 3 points last week with Ryan Tannehill throwing him the ball with Will Levis out. Will Levis looks like he's looking like he's going to be out probably this week as well. What are we doing with D-Hop, man?
John, I don't think you can start D-Hop. I don't think you can start D-Hop with Ryan Tannehill at the helm. When Ryan Tannehill is at the helm here, guys, the ball is not dispersed. He's not throwing it down the field. And they are a Derrick Henry first team with Ryan Tannehill at the helm. Not saying it's a good thing, not saying it's a bad thing, but what I'm telling you is from a Titans standpoint, what I'm telling you is from a D-Hop standpoint, it is a bad thing. Because what we've seen, John, is that, even looking at this Seattle defense, right? They were decent, but D-Hop didn't even get the targets, John. He got 4 targets for 2 receptions for 20 yards. That's the difference. When you have Will Levis, I'll just list it off to you. Before Ryan Tannehill, right? The last 3 games with Will Levis, 12 targets, 9 targets. Right? And then you go and you start against Seattle in a must-win game for Tennessee, who still wasn't out of the playoff, right? Well, now you are. And you only get your best player 4 targets. So, John, knowing that they're playing Houston, which, by the way, the last time that D-Hop played Houston, he only had 2 receptions for 21 yards. I am not willing to bank D-Hop with a Ryan Tannehill team knowing they're going to run the tits off of Derrick Henry to start my Super Bowl. Guys, I'm looking elsewhere. I don't even think he has a high floor, right? And I don't think his ceiling isn't even as high as what it would need to be in order to put him in. So I might be looking at more of a higher ceiling play or higher floor play. Unfortunately, D-Hop is in that middle purgatory ground this week.
Okay. All right. I want to talk about one receiver here, Frankie. The last guy, DJ Moore. DJ Moore for the Chicago Bears. The past couple weeks have been rough. I mean, it's tough defenses. They played at Cleveland. He had 7 points. Played Arizona at home. Only got 3 points in that game. 6 targets, but only 3 catches for 18 yards. This week, he's at home again against Atlanta. In your Super Bowl, are you relying on DJ Moore this week?
John, I think you have to. He's different than that of D-Hop. His upside is much higher overall. He's the number 8 receiver in half PPR. He's averaging 13.65 points a game at this point in time, John. And from a target share, it's been extremely consistent, right? I mean, we're talking, going back all the way to week 10, 9 targets, 13 targets, 10 targets, 8 targets. And even with him getting hurt, right, and was out for a portion of this game, he still had 6 targets. And so, John, for me, man, I think it was a product of he got banged up. I think it was a product of they went with the running attack with shout out Khalil Herbert, looked phenomenal against a pretty beaten up defense, but either way, he looked good. So against an Atlanta team that is very good, John, I still think I got to be in the flames with DJ Moore. As long as he's healthy, as long as he's good, thumbs up, that is Justin Fields' guy. And Justin Fields needs to continue to show that he does not need to be replaced by Caleb Williams. Therefore, you got to get your best player involved on that offense, which is DJ Moore.
All right, man. Let's get to fire now. Let's talk about some guys that just lit it on fire last week. Hey, 2 weeks in a row. I think it might be 3 weeks in a row. We're talking about this guy, Joe Flacco, the Cleveland Browns right here. Our star, young, upcoming quarterback, looking good.
Very vibrant.
35 points last week in fantasy. All right, this week, Joe Flacco, we've been riding in the flames. Hell, we had him on the cover of one of our episodes here. We've been saying over the last 3 weeks to start this guy because of the matchups, because of how he's playing, and because of what Stefanski's been scheming up for him. All right, this week on Thursday Night Football against the Jets, we firing up Flacco? That's a tough defense.
John, I'm not. And this is the thing. This is where you have to separate the emotional connection to your players and the matchup that they have, right? Strictly looking at Flacco, John, he has been nothing short of brilliant. 19 points, 27 points, 20 points, 35 points, right? Heading into the Jets, he couldn't be more on fire. It doesn't matter. This Jets defense is fucking good. They still have Sauce. They have DJ Reed. You have Quinnen Williams. You have CJ Mosley, right? All of these things in a beaten up, battered Browns offense. And yes, they've been playing inspired ball. And yes, it's the most fun shit, if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, that we've experienced in years. But putting your head on your shoulders correctly, you cannot afford to drop this game. It's the Super Bowl. So look elsewhere. There's Stafford. There's Jordan Love. There's Mason Rudolph at this point in time that I would actually potentially start over that of Joe Flacco. And it's strictly because of this matchup. And now that they have really good film, being the Jets, on how Amari Cooper has been cutting up teams due to Flacco, I'm telling you, man, I really think that they're going to really emphasize shutting Amari Cooper down. And this is going to be an absolute defensive slugfest. The other key call out is the weather component. John, it is supposed to be gross. It's supposed to be gross in Cleveland tomorrow, right? It's a night game. Thursday night, for whatever reason, the Thursday night games have been very low scoring. And on top of it, the weather. So now you layer in, right, Joe Flacco playing against his previous team, playing against that of a dominant defense and shit weather, right? All these things come together. I'm not willing to start Joe Flacco. Now, he could go for 30 more points again. Could be totally wrong. What I'm saying is the upside elsewhere has better matchups than you putting your stake in Flacco and hoping that he gets to 20 points, when in reality it could be anywhere between 13 to that of 18 this week.
Okay. All right, let's look at a couple other quarterbacks. 'Cause some of these guys, I'm not sure if I want to play these guys or not. We could use some help here, Frank. Let's talk about Derek Carr with the Saints. He's had a very tumultuous season, but the last 2 games, he's had really good matchups and has played well. 25 points against the Giants, 32 points against the Rams last week. Threw the ball 40 goddamn times. You don't see that out of Derek Carr very often. Okay, this week he's at Tampa Bay. Is Derek Carr a sneaky play for a streaming type quarterback?
Yes. I'm starting Derek Carr, John, over Flacco. That is a guy I'm starting Flacco or over Flacco. And it's strictly because both of them have been balling. It's not like, oh, I'm riding the momentum of Carr over Flacco. No, that doesn't make any sense. It's matchup. And Tampa Bay has been playing very well. The funny part of this is, though, Tampa Bay against quarterbacks is actually ranked in the top 20 in the NFL. Excuse me, bottom 20 of the NFL. I believe they're 25th out of 32 teams. And so with that being said, you now have Olave back and healthy. You have Kamara, who could be pissed off at all hell after having a rough game last game, to have a big bounce back. And by the way, they didn't need him to win, which was shocking. And so, John, the Saints aren't out of this. That's the other part of this. When you look at Tampa Bay, this is take all bets off, is what I'm getting at. This is a AFC North type of divisional matchup, which is happening in the NFC South. It is Baker Mayfield versus that of Derek Carr, playoffs on the line. Everything is at stake, and it's at Tampa Bay. What I'm getting at is, man, I mean, Derek Carr just cut up the Rams at the Rams. Derek Carr cut up the Giants again at home, right? And you go so on and so forth. He's played well for, half of the year, and now he's riding this momentum a bit. Again, man, I'm willing to take a risky start with Derek Carr, knowing this team is on the upswing and the matchup is a little bit better than that of like a Flacco, etc.
Okay. All right, let's get to another one that's definitely needs some help with here on whether or not we should start this guy. Jordan Love this week. 27 points out of Jordan Love. This week is a huge game for Jordan Love. Is the pressure going to be too much, or is this a guy you can roll out?
No, man, I'm all about Jordan Love this week. I think that, the Minnesota Vikings have had great defensive success as of late. But what's interesting, man, is Brian Flores is gone. Brian Flores is gone. He's not the DC anymore, right? He's the head coach. And so, I forget where he went, but he left that of the Minnesota Vikings. And so John, when you look at, it's at Minnesota, you look at the games that he has played with Tampa Bay, he put up 18.46 last week at Carolina, just slinging the ball all over the place. Man, what I'm seeing from Jordan Love is, even though Jaden Reed was out, even though Wicks got hurt, right? All of these things, he's still performing, and Aaron Jones is back and healthy. This has given Jordan Love breathing room. It's giving him the ability to now start working within the offense a bit differently than what we've seen. Aaron Jones is a damn good running back, so much different than that of AJ Dillon, so much different than that of Patrick Taylor. It's a different feel when he's on the field. So for me, man, I like Jordan Love this week in a Sunday night matchup with everything on the line. I'm willing to put my money on Jordan Love.
All right, let's take a look at some running backs here. Breece Hall, 37 points. Finally, you got Breece Hall.
There it is, baby.
I'm still going to bring up my Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall. I put that team together for this week, not for the first week of the playoffs, and I ended up losing that. But Breece Hall, okay, let's look at it here for practical applications. Thursday night football against the Browns, very tough run defense. Are you starting Breece Hall and staying in the flames with him?
God, that is so hard, John. Browns are top 10. Browns are top 10 against the running backs. You need to make that decision on your and I know that's a terrible answer, but this is one of those that's flip the coin, because what it's going to come down to is the Jets are going to need to run the ball in order to win this game. That is what it's going to need to happen. Breece Hall should get a heavy dose of volume. What he does with that is completely dependent on JOK, Sion Taki, and really, Thanos in the middle with Dalvin Tomlinson. And so for me, man, I'm cautiously saying this, I probably would be starting Breece Hall, knowing that you probably don't have better options that are really providing that much more of an uptick. They're probably a little bit more risky. And this is where I could see Breece Hall at his worst, John. At his worst, I could see him this week probably getting you 7-8 points. So for me, man, I'm going to stay in the flames with Breece Hall, but it's like caution tape all around it, right? That's how I imagine this, because it's not a sexy start. This is strictly a start that you're praying a little bit and hoping you need a little bit of luck, but you probably don't have a better option. So yeah, I would say I'm going to go with Breece Hall this week.
Yeah, there's not a lot of guys. I mean, if you've got your team's been stacked up with running backs and you've got James Cook and you've got Kyron Williams,
Right.
you're obviously starting those guys over him. Would you start Clyde Edwards-Helaire, CEH, over Breece Hall this week?
No, I would not, John. And it's strictly because of volume play and shit weather for that of Breece Hall. I just think that anything can happen. CH is so much of a wild card. Patrick Mahomes could end up finding Travis Kelce for 4 touchdowns, right? Just so much more can happen. So with that difference, that's a great analogy or a great would you rather. I'm going to stay in the flames of Breece Hall.
All right. Sounds good. Let's see here. Jahmyr Gibbs, you're going to fire him up. Great week. 21 points out of him. Khalil Herbert, and we'll talk about him, I think, a little bit later here in our starts and sits, but 19 points out of him. Really nice game. James Conner, almost 20 points out of James Conner. What are we doing with James Conner this week? It's not a guy we talk about a lot. He's, kind of got a high floor, little low ceiling kind of guy, but he's been playing really well. What are we doing this week with James Conner?
John, I got to fire him up. I got to fire up James Conner, guys. And it's, you're looking at this matchup and you're looking at what he's done. I mean, he put up 17 points against San Francisco, 20 points against that of Chicago last week. And now you're going into Philly. I mean, Philly needs to win the game. Like, let's be crystal clear of this. I think that they know that they need to shut down James Conner. And for the most part, Philly has done a good job against the run. However, you can't go away from James Conner this week. You got to stay in the flames with him. And I really think, because this Arizona offense truly revolves around James Conner at this point in time. And so for me, man, I think that I would be starting him up. And I'm actually starting up James Conner even over CEH, right? Even though it's a tough matchup, I just believe in that offense, and it's in him being a part of that offense, the main focal point of it.
All right. Let's get to some receivers on fire here, man. We're going to talk about the Thursday night preview, so let's not get into Amari Cooper, but we've got to shout out Amari Cooper for his 49-point performance. Single game receiving record for the franchise of the Cleveland Browns. Congratulations, Amari. All right, let's take a look at a couple of guys here. George Pickens, good to see him back here. He found a friend with Mason Rudolph. 35 points out of George Pickens. Frankie, what are we looking like this week with the matchup? Can you stay in the flames with George Pickens this week?
I think you can. John, I totally think you can. And it's, 35 points. I wouldn't expect that again. Like, you know what I mean? That type of thing. But Mason Rudolph's throwing the ball down the field. We haven't seen it from Pittsburgh. And that bodes very well for Pickens. And so when you look at, okay, Seattle's a tough matchup. Let's call a spade, right? You have Woolen and Tyreek Woolen, and you have B-Wags, Bobby Wagner at the linebacker position, and Love as well from the safety perspective. Seattle Seahawks have a damn good defense. They are definitely underrated. However, George Pickens balled, dude. And this dude is riding with a chip on his shoulder because of all the shit talk, all the stuff from the media, including myself. I said, you know what? Dude's kind of a shitbag. Block for your team, right? And so I think that this now has added that, kind of fuck you mentality a little bit, even more so to George Pickens. And so, John, I think, yeah, man, you ride in the flames with him. I think he has this is a great example of a high ceiling play. Yeah, it's risky, but I like this type of play, depending on your roster construction, over that of a D-Hop. This is a perfect example because we can see that with Mason Rudolph, they're throwing the ball down the field rather than that of a Ryan Tannehill.
Gabe Davis. Let's just go. That's all I got to say is Gabe Davis, and we just start laughing. Gabe Davis, the balls you got to have on you to play Gabe Davis in your playoffs.
You see what I'm holding here?
Like this.
These are Tyler Ross's shout out. His balls, right? They're huge. Okay. Tyler Ross, shout out for those listening and watching. We have a high roller league, right? It's a blast. Tyler Ross knew this is a beautiful, like almost perfect. No, it was perfect. I'm going to give him this. Roster construction, he needed a ceiling play. He was playing against myself. The only reason why I beat him was because of Amari Cooper. Had Amari Cooper done normal shit, I would have lost because he decided to start Gabe Davis. And I got to pull this up because this is pretty incredible. John, he decided to start Gabe Davis over quite a few others. That was absolutely and utterly shocking, to the point to where he started Gabe Davis over Noah Brown. He started Gabe Davis over Gus Edwards. And he started Gabe Davis over Josh Palmer, knowing Keenan Allen was out. So guys, when we talk about roster construction, when we talk about coaching, when we talk about you have to stay like really in tune, especially down the playoffs, Tyler Ross, that was as good as you could get from a coaching perspective. Hats off to you, but also fuck you because I beat you. Sorry.
It was great. He was worried about the matchup. He was worried about the projections, and he knew he needed a ceiling play. I need a guy that's going to hit a home run.
Brilliant play. Not
a guy with a safe floor, and he got it with Gabe Davis. That was great. Balls of the week go out to Tom.
Balls of the week.
All right, man. You know what we're going to do now is we're going to do our little hit it and quit it, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Except I turned it down. Now we're going to hit it.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah. All right, man. All right, with our hit it's and quit it's, our starts and sits for week 17, man. Super Bowl, baby. This is important, Frankie. What do you got for us? Who are you starting in your tier 1, 12 to 16 team leagues? Who are we starting, baby?
It's me running to the finish line, baby. 12 to 16 man league. First guy we're firing up, Rashee Rice versus that of the Cincinnati Bengals. John, Rashee Rice, based on PFF, heading into the week, is a top 10 start from a receiver perspective. John, what was fascinating, here's why I'm saying this, guys. 12 to 16 man league, right? Excuse me, you could even make an argument for an 8 to 10 man league. I'm starting him over D-Hop as well. Here's why. Looking at the last 5 weeks, target share alone, John, 10 targets against that of Vegas the first time, 9 targets against Green Bay, 10 targets against Buffalo, 9 targets against that of New England, and 12 targets against that of Vegas again. John, he is dominating the target share, especially with the downgrade of that of Jerick McKinnon, especially with the lackluster play of that of Kadarius Toney, and Sky Moore being on IR. This is a perfect storm for that of Rashee Rice heading into this week in, as crazy as this sounds, a must-win matchup for Kansas City, right? They could still lose. John, they could not win the division if Denver and or that of the Raiders keep winning. And so what's fascinating, man, is that looking against the Cincinnati team, we saw what George Pickens has done. We saw what Deontay Johnson has done. We saw what these other receivers have done, right? You think about Jordan Addison, right, against Cincinnati 2 weeks ago, right? JJ even against Cincinnati. What I'm getting at is they have been torched in the last few weeks, and I'm going to stay in the flames with Rashee Rice, baby.
I love it. How do you not play him right now? With that kind of target share, you have to, man. Yeah, he is the go-to guy right now for Patrick Mahomes. Love it, man. Who else you got?
John, we're going to roll with the Javonte Williams against that of the Chargers. Now, this is by no means a smash start in my eyes, right? The Chargers are kind of unknown with them potentially going to be playing more inspired ball with Brandon Staley out. So that makes me a little nervous because you're not really sure. However, Denver needs to run this through with Javonte Williams. They're banged up. Cortland Sutton's banged up, right? A few others on that defensive front for Denver. They need to be able to control the clock and control the ball. I think a perfect example of this is the game against the Chargers with that of Buffalo, right? Chargers are playing inspired ball. That's what I mean, right? They should have actually beaten Buffalo. And so again, in order for this to be good, we saw what James Cook, we just mentioned it, did against them, 70 yards on 20 carries. We saw like Fournette, we talked about that. He performed very well when he got the opportunity. I like to see this going with Javonte, start him up as a high floor play in deeper leagues.
All right. Who else we got here, Frankie?
John, I'm telling you, this is a good play. For me, this is borderline a smash play. I'm going DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift against that of Arizona. DeAndre Swift played very well against the Giants. And before that, he's actually been kind of rough, right? So we're looking at Buffalo Bills, week 12, he had 9 points. He played San Fran, 3 points, Dallas, 3 points, Seattle, 9 points. That's a brutal stretch. Nowhere near the Giants and Arizona. Fire him up. Don't overthink this. Enjoy DeAndre Swift this week.
Right,
John,
give me another running back, baby. Come on.
I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna
we
hit
need
you.
running back help. You know we need it.
We need it so bad. And I'll tell you what, this one's interesting. I'm gonna go with Ty Chandler against that of Green Bay. And John, the reason being is because Ty Chandler has definitely taken the bulk of the load from Madison, and it's pretty evident at this point in time. On top of it, with that of Addison being injured, Hockenson being injured, they're going to have to really rely elsewhere in addition to that of JJ and maybe KJ Osborne. So for me, man, Ty Chandler, not as much of a smash play as that of DeAndre Swift or even that of Javonte. However, I like the upside knowing Green Bay's defense has not performed well against opposing running backs.
I like it for the fact that you've got Hockenson and you've got Addison most likely going to be out. I like it for the sake of targets.
Sure.
I think Ty Chandler could be a guy that can help supplement some of those targets out of the backfield. All right, Frankie, let's look at our tier 2, 8 to 10 team leagues. Give us some starters. Give us some guys you like here, man.
I'm going to lump 2 in here, John. We're rolling with some Rams again, baby. We're firing up Stafford against that of the Giants, and we are firing up Kyren Williams once more. If you're not firing him up or you're questioning if he's even an automatic start or not, set it and forget it. He is the guy. He is dominant against the Giants team. We just mentioned what DeAndre Swift did. 16 points against the Giants. Imagine what Kyren Williams is going to do. And so, man, I am really excited about this. In addition, look at Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee. Like all of these cats, man, are performing really, really at a high level. And so I really see Stafford continuing this elite play into this coming week for your Super Bowl. Fire him up with confidence. I will be putting my money where my mouth is and doing the same. I'm firing up Stafford in my league.
You know, we talked about Kyren Williams. We talked about him mid-season, probably week 5-ish.
We did.
And said, this is going to be a guy who's going to win you your Super Bowl. Let's see if our predictions come true. This is the week. Kyren Williams, baby. Could be the Super Bowl winner for you. All right, who else you got, babe?
John, 8 to 10, rolling with Bijan Robinson. And the reason why I'm saying Bijan Robinson is because you think that it should be a set it and forget it. I've had people reach out, John, that said, hey, I am looking at Bijan Robinson. I'm looking at DeAndre Swift. I'm looking at, a few of these other guys, especially with injuries. It's tough. And Bijan Robinson, John, I know it's a little too soon, but I mean, he kind of goes hot and then he goes cold and then he goes hot and then he goes cold. And technically this week would be the week that he would go cold based on the pattern. But I'm going to say he breaks that. The reason being is because they're playing at Chicago. It's probably going to be a shit weather game, knowing that there's a lot of crappy weather coming in the Midwest and Northeast. And on top of that, John, they need to win to solidify the playoffs. Okay, in order for them to do that, I think if Arthur Smith can get his shit together and just say, I win when I play the best player I've ever had on my team. That's what's happening. So run the tits off Bijan Robinson, be effective in the game management, and watch this dude crush that of Chicago Bears. And I really, really like this matchup.
All right. It hurts my soul when you're saying to start Brees, to start Bijan, and I'm sorry. It hurts, man. It hurts my soul. Yeah.
John, the last guy here, I'm going to stay in the flames with another 49er, and it's going to be Brandon Ayuk, guys. And this is in an 8 to 10 man league, right? Think of that of the D-Hops. No go. Don't start him over that. I'm firing up Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk is playing at Washington. Washington is terrible. Let me repeat that. Washington is terrible. This is a dream matchup for all 49ers, including that of Brandon Ayuk. And the reason why I'm going with Brandon Ayuk, John, and not Debo this week, Debo, absolutely, you should be starting him. But I like Brandon Ayuk because when we saw Brock Purdy go out, we saw Darnold looking at Brandon Ayuk and not that of Debo. So if something happens in the Super Bowl and you start Brock Purdy, or you're playing, or Brock Purdy's playing and then gets hurt, Brandon Ayuk to me is more of he's not going to get as hindered by that injury is what it would be potentially for Debo. So for me, that's why I'm locking in Brandon Ayuk in an 8 to 10 man league.
I love it, man. Yeah, he's been playing awesome. I love him. All right, let's get to who we're sitting here, Frank. Give me a couple of guys who we need to sit down this week. And there's a couple of shockers on here. You're going to have some splaining to do.
Yeah, man. This is shocking, guys. But this is where right championships are made. Put the emotional shit aside. Look at the data. Look at the matchups. The number one guy I'm sitting, John, and this is a risk, Tony Pollard. I'm sitting Tony Pollard this week. I'm firing up Javonte over Tony Pollard. I'm going to fire up, DeAndre Swift over that of Tony Pollard. John, the reason being is because Tony Pollard, I have this image in my head of him that when he was on the 2-yard line, and he had a beeline to the fucking pylon, and he cuts it back in on the 2-yard line and doesn't score. John, that is a problem. That is not a tier 1 running back. 2-yard line, you punch that shit in or beat him to the pylon. And Tony Pollard is in this hell right now. And to the tune of, let's look at historically over the last 2 weeks alone. At Buffalo, 6.7 points. Okay. This past week against Miami in a good matchup, right? He was in the red zone multiple times. John, didn't matter. He only had 38 yards rushing on 12 carries. And now you're telling me that they're going to play against Detroit, which, by the way, has been very good to the tune of number 1 against opposing running backs. For me, guys, I get it. You might be looking at me like I have a third eye. Personally, I give these insights to you on what would Frank do. Frank would be not firing up Tony Pollard this week. I would be sitting him.
WWFD, what would Frankie do? And he is not playing Tony Pollard. All right. Who else we sitting down here, bud?
John, another one is going to be Khalil Herbert. Now, people are like, what? Khalil Herbert just went off. He had an incredible game. Sure did. Here's the problem. Atlanta's defense is number 2 against the running backs. Number 2. Khalil Herbert has been outside of that past game against Arizona, which, by the way, it's fucking Arizona. Let's not read too much into this, right? When you look at what he did against Cleveland, 1 point. What did he do against Detroit? Detroit the week before Cleveland, 0.8 points. What did he do against Minnesota? 4 points. What did he do against Detroit again? 5 points. What did he do against Carolina? 0 points. John, I'm not willing to risk my fantasy football Super Bowl on Khalil Herbert, and this isn't even a ceiling play. This isn't that brilliant play that Tyler Ross did for Gabe Davis. It's not that. There's not enough history here for Khalil Herbert. So for me, I'm looking elsewhere, man, from that start.
All right, let's end it on a couple of controversial ones you got here, Frank.
Okay.
Let's
So-
go. Who else you sitting?
This is crazy. And I get it. This is fucking crazy. I don't know if I can start Stephon Diggs this week. Okay, I don't know. Now, in deep leagues, yes, John. 12 to 16 man leagues, you have to. You have to start.
Of course.
In an 8-man league, I am not starting Stephon Diggs. And it's a really risky play. But when you start looking at the information, it's like, okay, well, who else could I really end up playing? And there's a slew of different people. But when we look at New England Patriots, okay, they're 19th, right? They're middle of the road in terms of against opposing receivers. But the problem is that when you look over really, John, since week 10, Stephon Diggs has only been in double digits 1 week. Other than that, John, week 10 against Denver, 4.9 points. Week 11 against the Jets, 3 points. Week 12 against the Philly, right? That's when he had 16 points. Newsflash, Philly's defensive backfield is terrible, awful, some of the worst in the NFL. Then they have bye week. Then they go to Kansas City, John, 4.4 points. Then you go to Dallas, 6.8 points in just a crazy game. And then you have the Chargers, which should have been a grand slam, 5.4 points. Guys, here's what I'm saying. In deep leagues, I would be firing up Stephon Diggs. If you are looking at an 8 to 10 man league, you have a serious decision to make. Are you willing to put your team's back on that of Stephon Diggs? I don't know if I would be. It's something that you need to stay in tune, need to figure out, need to dig deep and really understand if this is something you want to do. For me, I wouldn't be doing it. And so it's a really interesting predicament because, John, we were just saying 2 weeks ago, he's an automatic start. And I don't know in these types of shallow leagues if he is.
I agree with you, man. Since they changed offensive coordinators, it has changed that offense. They've got a lot more 12 personnel. They've got a lot more running. Dawson Knox has been on the field a lot more. Dawson Kincaid has not been involved as much. Stephon Diggs has not been involved. So, yeah, it's a little scary. The offense changed on us 3/4 of the way through the season, and you've got to adjust. You can't just look at the name and automatically put the guy in your lineup. This is your Super Bowl. You've got to look at that. If you have other options, I absolutely would consider those options. Yeah.
John, the last one here is another controversial as hell. I'm sitting, and this one is actually for me less controversial than the Diggs. I am sitting Tua Tagovailoa, and I'm not thinking twice about it. I'm not even remotely looking to pick him up. I'm not remotely looking to start him. If you have him, I'm looking elsewhere. They're playing at Baltimore. Look at what Baltimore has done to opposing quarterbacks, and you tell me if you want to fire him up. On top of it, John, when looking at the last 3 week stretch, okay, last 3 weeks against Tennessee, 2.1 points. That's a quarterback, Tua. Okay, week 15 against the Jets, 12. Okay, week 16 against Dallas, 15. What I'm getting at is, guys, we just saw Brock Purdy get decimated. We've seen other teams play against that of the Baltimore Ravens defense, and they look silly. I don't think they're going to look silly. I don't think Miami's going to look silly. This is going to be another juggernaut matchup. Both teams are trying to fight for that number 1 overall seed. And to be honest with you, as a Browns fan, I'm rooting for Tua. I am. The problem is, I'm not willing to put Tua as my quarterback with Jalen Waddle hurt, Raheem Mostert banged up, Devon Achane kind of in this limbo, and Tyreek Hill. Yeah, Tyreek Hill is back, but Tyreek Hill was just kind of really injured, right? I mean, his ankle was fucked. And so now you're telling me they're going against the number 1 defense in the NFL at Baltimore. It's not even home. And we're looking at Brock Purdy throwing 4 interceptions in the first 3 quarters of this past game, who, by the way, was the MVP runaway before this game. So, John, for me, all of this to take into consideration, well, what would you do then, Frank? I'll tell you what I'd do. Pick Stafford's ass up and start him. That is the guy. I'm starting Jordan Love over that of Tua Tagovailoa this week. Guys, and it's not, again, I have nothing against Tua. It's strictly, I'm delineating my emotional shit with that of what am I really willing to do to put myself in a position to win my Super Bowl? And I'm willing to go much more safer than that of a Tua Tyreek Hill type of thing, especially now with Waddle out.
Right, man. I like it. It was a very good argument. So I'm with you on it. All right, let's take a look at some streams of the week here, Frankie.
Right.
If we made it to the Super Bowl, but we're looking at streaming. We've been streaming quarterback, tight end, defense the whole way. Who are we looking at that we can plug in this week for us, man?
Yeah, man. From a quarterback perspective, I think you can absolutely fire up Nick Mullins. I mean, we were talking about that, John. I mean, hey, the last 2 weeks he's been a starter. 21 points, 19 points, played the Detroit Lions, right? In a game to where, yeah, it was kind of gross. But, I mean, shit, dude, the last 2 weeks he's put up 300 points. Or 300 points, that'd be great, right? 300 yards and 400 yards. Nick Mullins threw for 400 yards against the Detroit Lions last week, against the team in Green Bay, who, by the way, is 17th against opposing quarterbacks. So this, to me, man, even with Hockenson out, even with Addison hurt, you have JJ and you still have KJ Osborne and you still have Ty Chandler and Alexander Madison. I like Nick Mullins is a sneaky stream that you can pick up and potentially start.
All right. What about a tight end option?
Definitely rolling with 2 here, man. We're going with Chig from that of Tennessee against that of Houston. He's really starting to come on. And with Tannehill now, it's so much better because this is now away from that of D-Hop. Now we're checking it down to Chig, things like that. Or Derrick Henry is throwing touchdowns to Chig, right, at this point in time. So that's kind of crazy. Or you can look at Hunter Henry. Right, Hunter Henry, if he plays, guys, again, he was out last week, a little bit banged up, but if he plays at Buffalo, he could be a super sneaky stream option for sure.
All right, give us some defense options here, man.
Yeah, man, I'm going to roll with Houston defense against that of Tennessee, right? With Ryan Tannehill playing, Houston, if they win and that if the Jags lose, they're in, right? I mean, there's so much happening here. So for me, there's so much on the line for Houston. I really like Houston's defense. You could also look at the Jags. Now, the Jags have been beaten up and battered over the last few weeks, but they are playing Carolina at home. And for that, John, I do like the Jags defense against Carolina.
All right. All right. That's the streamers here. Let's get to a little quick Thursday night football preview. Thursday night football on Amazon. We've got the New York Jets going to the Cleveland Browns. Browns are favored by 7.5. Over under of 35 points. That's a very low over under. So right now, the obvious fantasy starts here are the defenses. I think you can start both defenses here. Other than that, we talked about Breece Hall and how you felt about that. What about Garrett Wilson? How are we thinking here? We've got Trevor Siemian throwing them the ball, this great Browns defensive backfield. What are you doing with Garrett Wilson?
John, for me, I actually think you have to fire up Garrett Wilson. I really believe that. And it's strictly because, yes, I get it. The Browns defense is incredible. However, looking at what Garrett Wilson's done with Trevor Siemian, and again, we have a very, 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 very small sample size. He had 15 targets. He had 15 targets against that of Washington, right? And I get it. Washington sucks. But the reason why I like this, John, is because the game script for majority of the game was shit for that of Garrett Wilson. They were up the entirety of the game outside of the fourth quarter. And so they still got 15 targets. So for me, John, this is not a start to where I'm expecting Garrett Wilson to go nuclear. This is a start to where I'm saying, hey, I know that this is going to be what it is. I know that Denzel Ward's going to be draped over him, or Martin Emerson, or that of Greg Newsome, but they don't have anything else. They literally don't have anything else from the receiving end at this point in time. And that's why I'm okay to fire up Garrett Wilson this week.
Okay. Anybody else on the Jets that you have any interest in whatsoever?
Tyler Conklin could be interesting. Browns have struggled against the tight end landscape for a bit, and Tyler Conklin, he could be a 6-point type of tight end, and which I would take. I would absolutely take that. So he could be something. But John, other than that, and obviously we mentioned Breece Hall, you look elsewhere.
All right, let's look at the Cleveland Browns. I mean, we talked about Amari Cooper and what he did last week, obviously record-breaking. How do you feel about him this week and in any of the other pass catchers for the Browns here against this very difficult Jets defense?
John, I'm starting Amari Cooper, but guys, I don't like this matchup. I have to start Amari because I have nobody else. I literally don't have somebody that can remotely replace. I don't even have a better ceiling play. So for me, the way my roster is constructed, due to injuries and things like that, I have to bank on Amari. And so that's just the way my team has been. But if you have other options, this might be the week. This might be the week. And it's crazy, right? It's crazy we're saying that coming off of a franchise-shattering record that he broke. But it's the matchup. It's a short week, right? It's going to be shit weather. And so you can make the argument of, I might not want to start him, and maybe I go somebody else. Maybe I go with Terry McLaurin. Maybe I go somebody that's a little bit different from that perspective.
Rashee
but
Rice.
Rashee Rice, I'm definitely starting Rashee Rice over Amari Cooper this week. But for me, man, I have to start him. It's not a guy that I'm willing to bench for a somewhat decent high side play. It's risky though. John, I'll tell you who I am willing to play in DFS. Not start in the Super Bowl for my fantasy team, but DFS, Elijah Moore. The reason why, this is a revenge game. People want to talk about Joe Flacco, this being revenge. This is not revenge for Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's a Raven, right? He played 3 years for the Jets. It was what it was. There's no animosity there whatsoever. Elijah Moore, completely different story. He wants to embarrass the Jets. I can see a lot of interesting plays that Joe Flacco, knowing this, is like, yeah, man, I'm going to tee up a bit. So guys, for me, you might have to start Elijah Moore. Maybe for some injuries and things like that, you have Elijah Moore and you're in a double flex league and you're like, maybe it's not a great matchup, but sometimes sometimes these players in an emotional setting, they're trying to find ways to just get them over the hump of this mentality of like, it doesn't matter who the hell I'm playing. It doesn't matter who's in front of me. I'm going to destroy you. And this is that week for me for Elijah Moore.
All right. And you said that's for a DFS lineup, not for
DFS lineup. Yeah. DraftKings, like daily fantasy guys. And John, I'm definitely firing up Njoku, by the way. 100%, no question about it. Set it and forget it. Njoku's gold.
All right. What about the run game? That's where things get a little tricky. This has changed big time for the Browns. It's been a decent floor, but that seems to be all that there is for the running backs right now is just a floor. With Jerome Ford specifically, is this the week? You can run on the Jets. They are a little vulnerable. We've got bad weather. You've got Kareem Hunt, who's got limited practice and is banged up on a short week. Are we going to see more running out of these Cleveland Browns?
Yes, but it's not great. And I say that because, John, yes, you are 100% right in your assessment of, can you run against the Jets? They're 26th against running backs. Okay. But you look at what Jerome Ford has done over the last few weeks, 15 rushes against that of Houston for 25 yards and a touchdown. Had he not had that touchdown, it would have been a terrible week for Jerome Ford. Before that, John, 8 rushes for 20 yards against Chicago. Should have been a great matchup. 12 receptions for 51 yards against Jacksonville. Should have been a great matchup. Nine rushes for 19 yards against that of the Rams. Should have been a good matchup. And then Denver, 9 rushes for 65 yards. Now, what Jerome Ford has shown us, though, is glimpses from the receiving perspective. So, John, bringing it full circle, I would consider starting Jerome Ford in an RB2 or a flex spot if you have injuries or if there's something happening, like you have Devon Achane and you're really debating, okay, who would I pick? Devon Achane or that of a Jerome Ford? I'm actually going to lean Jerome Ford, right? Strictly because weather shit. Yes, Jets have a great defense, but have been kind of beaten and battered against the rush recently. So that would be an example of who I might start over Devon Achane. But again, to your point, you're not going for ceiling. You're going for stability. You're going for floor play in your Super Bowl. So if you want to start maybe a high ceiling type of cat or somebody who's a little more risky, go with then Jerome Ford, who's going to be anywhere from that 8-point half PPR to probably 13. And I think that's where he'll sit this week.
Mm-hmm.
It's risky.
Jerome Ford over Tony Pollard.
Oh, man, that's so hard. Yeah, I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to go crazy and I'm going to say yeah. And strictly because matchup based, and I think they're going to try to take out Flacco in the passability. I think the Browns are going to have to run.
Too. And when you're looking at a 7.5 point spread, that's going to give me some play to the running back there.
Brilliant call. Game script.
Yeah, game script for sure. All right, anyone else on the Cleveland Browns or in this game you want to talk about, Frank?
No, man.
All right. Real quick here, let's touch base on the Saturday game. We've got the Detroit Lions at the Dallas Cowboys on Saturday night. A Saturday night special. What a great game, man. The Cowboys are favored by 6 at home. Over under, a little bit different than the Browns-Jets game. 53.5 point over under here. So we're going to have some fireworks, man. We're going to see some touchdowns, some scoring in this game. All right, let's talk about Detroit Lions here, man. Who do you love? Lay it out to me.
I mean, I'm firing up Jahmyr Gibbs, 100%. I'm even firing up David Montgomery, which this is not a good matchup for David Montgomery, John. But I am firing up David Montgomery strictly because if they get to the goal line, you know he's getting the handoff, and he has been very good on the goal line. So I'm firing up those guys. Amon-Ra St. Brown, definitely no question about it. And then on top of it, you got to fire up Sam Laporta. And I mean, if you're also looking at Jared Goff, I mean, John, Jared Goff has been strong over the last few weeks after having kind of a couple lumps. He's taken some lumps, a couple weeks prior. So it's nice to see him bouncing back as well. I think you can fire up the slew of them. To your point, this is going to be a shootout.
All right, man. All right, what about the Cowboys here? You were already a little skittish about Tony Pollard. Pollard. How you feeling about everybody else?
CD, like smash start. Like just fire him up, set it and forget
slam.
it. CD slam.
Okay.
Jake Ferguson slam. Start him up as well. Definitely Jake Ferguson. And John, I think you fire up Dak. I think you fire up Dak this week. A good question that I had somebody reach out to me is, Would you rather start Patrick Mahomes against the Las Vegas Raiders, or excuse me, Patrick Mahomes this week against that of the Cincinnati, or would you rather start Dak Prescott against that of the Detroit Lions? I said Dak Prescott. Now, I'm curious to know what you would say, and we're splitting hairs. That's how close for me it was. What would you say?
I do say Dak Prescott. I think they've had so much pressure. They just got beat up so bad that they've got so much to play for. I think he's got better options too when it comes to at home, no weather to worry about, and I think he's just got better options to throw to. I love Rashee Rice, but Rashee Rice is not an alpha receiver like a CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb can take over a game on his own, and I think that you may see that this week for sure.
Love it.
Yeah. All right, man. Anything else on this game?
No, man. And I'll tell you what, John, I want to make one quick shout out as well as we're wrapping up. Guys, this is Super Bowl week. This is what you play for. This is the exciting shit. Talk a lot of shit in your leagues. Get people riled up. Have some fun. Play some DFS. You know why? Because we're wrapping up this year on a good note. We're going to start next year with some fun things. John and I will end up doing a few more episodes here for daily fantasy lineups. We'll do some also recapping the prior year and looking ahead into what are we starting to do from a draft strategy to leave you guys with something. But guys, I want to make this call out. Thank you again. John mentioned it early on. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for tuning in. And more importantly, send us some comments of you guys winning your Frankly Fantasy Football trophies, and we will shout you out on the next episode. We love you guys.
That's right. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget, you can watch us on, follow us on social media, Instagram at Frankly Fantasy Football. It's a great follow. Great place to follow us in the off season as well, guys, just to kind of tease a little bit and keep your mind a little bit into some football and some fantasy football. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for subscribing. We're so close, guys. We're almost there. Get us over the hump. Share it. Subscribe to it. Tell your friends about us. Get us going for next year. We're going to have a great time, man. Also, take a look at your kickers. Make sure your kickers are indoors in good weather this week. I know it's a minor thing, but it is your Super Bowl. Also, look at the early games. Get those guys out of your flex in the early games. You got a Thursday and a Saturday game this week. Put them in your regular spots. All right, guys. Frankie, you better bring home that goddamn trophy. I want to see 2 trophies. 2 trophies next year. All right, man? All right. Good luck to all of you. Go out there and go get your goddamn titles. We love you so much. Thanks for listening. May the fantasy gods smile upon you. Bye.